Very, very warm welcome. It's a real pleasure, it's a real honor actually to start this year with really a sort of absolutely incredible discussion here. Very warm welcome to Annalena Baerbock, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Germany, Luigi Di Maio, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy. It's a really wonderful opportunity for us to host this discussion on the revival of the European Union. Now, I think the year that has just closed was really a year that in many ways could be seen as a year of sort of restart of the European project. I mean, we jumped from literally one existential crisis to the next for almost 2 decades. If we date back to the 2005 Constitutional Treaty, jumping through the Eurozone crisis, the migration crisis, then of course Brexit, the pandemic, but in fact through the pandemic we refound a sense of unity, we refound a sense of purpose. Through the green agenda we found a new vision, we found a new growth strategy, and we found a potential route to a political union. Now, having said all this, it's also a year, this new year that is now ahead of us, a year in which from the vision we have to start moving into the action. And once we get into the action, the going tends to get rougher. It tends to get rougher because, of course, we have to sustain an economic recovery still amidst a pandemic. We have to implement a green agenda amidst an energy crisis. And we have to think about what it means actually for Europe also to play a global role amidst a European security architecture which has crumbled and in which war on the continent is a real threat. So to think about all this, it's, as I said, a real honor to have 2 ministers of 2 key member states of the European Union to share their thoughts with us today. So let me begin by giving Luigi the floor, Minister of Foreign Affairs and International Cooperation of Italy, for his introductory remarks, and then to Annalena Baerbock for her speech. Luigi.
Thank you, dear colleague, dear Annalena. Welcome, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen. I thank Minister Baerbock, the Embassy of the Federal Republic of Germany in Rome, Director Nathalie Tocci, and the Institute for International Affairs for this opportunity to address you today. As the consultations I've just had with Minister Baerbock have confirmed, Italy and Germany share long-standing friendship and common views on key European and international dossiers and intend to strengthen them through an even more structured strategic partnership. The bilateral plan of action we are working on will in fact establish a platform of cooperation to fine-tune respective stances in promoting the European agenda. 2021 has been a critical year in all these respects, as G20 presidency and the co-chair of COP26 has engaged in bolstering a multilateral response to the pandemic crisis, outlining a better recovery through the green and digital transition. The year that just started will be a critical test for the global resolve to achieve a more sustainable recovery. Against the backdrop of the pandemic and the climate crisis, the European Union has been able to embrace a visionary approach, putting solidarity and mutual responsibility at the heart of its action. The Next Generation EU has translated this approach into a European roadmap to recover better. We have joined our forces to make our economies and societies more sustainable, competitive, and resilient. Reinforcing Europe requires a high degree of internal EU cohesion and resilience, and to this end, we need to listen to our citizens to tackle issues from health to energy prices, which have a concrete impact on their daily lives. The Conference on the Future of Europe is an opportunity to foster a transnational public debate, redefine EU priorities, and thus deliver stronger legitimacy to the EU. This vision of the European future needs the engagement of younger generations. The European Commission has declared 2022 the European Year of Youth to boost the inclusion of young people in European decision-making processes and policies. In this same perspective, Italy has placed the youth at the center of its contribution to the Conference of the Future of Europe, with events such as the EU Balkan Youth Forum, 22-26 November, and the Med Youth Forum, 2 December. Only with the energy of the new generations, Europe will be able to realize the cultural, economic, and social revolution implied by the EU Recovery Plan, and in particular by the green transition. The investments mobilized by the Next Generation EU are instrumental to the ambitious EU climate agenda. With the Green Deal and the Fit for 55 package presented by the Commission, Europe aims at becoming the first climate-neutral continent by 2050. It is essential that these investments support a gradual process accompanying our industrial systems without shocks towards more sustainable models of production. The Green Deal shall lead to new opportunities for investment and growth through the implementation of eco-sustainable systems, circular economy models, and higher standards of energy performance of buildings, as well as by addressing the issue of sustainable food production. Italy and Germany have embraced the green transition, which has been at the core of Italy's G20 presidency last year, and which is among the priorities of the German presidency of the G7 this year, with a long-term vision. Italy and Germany are ready to develop a green partnership. To leverage on the resources mobilized for the recovery, we shall invest in innovation. Italy has embarked on a true innovation diplomacy strategy aimed at encouraging the private sector to channel investments towards the green and the digital transition. The Innovation League we promoted as G20 presidency moved in this direction, which we are determined to pursue, finding synergies with our partners such as Germany. Addressing effectively the climate challenge will also be a first step towards building a European strategic autonomy. We need to continue working on this, starting from the areas where the reflection is more developed and keeping in mind the need to balance such autonomy with European traditional openness. As shown by recent events from Afghanistan to the Mediterranean and the Balkans, we have to strengthen our European foreign and security policy to protect our common values and security interests. Also in this perspective, we discussed with Minister Baerbock about the situation at the eastern borders of Europe between Russia, Belarus, and Ukraine, as well as about migration in its European external and internal dimensions. Europe can and must act as a global actor, supporting multilateralism and rules-based international order, and promoting international cooperation on global challenges from health to climate and sustainability. Italy looks forward to working together with Germany, dear Annalena, for a stronger political Europe. I am sure that today's debate will offer new ideas to move forward together on this path. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, dear Minister. And now, please, Mr. Minister Baerbock, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon also from my side. It's really a pleasure being here. Thanks a lot, liebe Nathalie Tocci. Thanks a lot, ladies and gentlemen. Thanks a lot, Luigi, that we can have this event today, even under Corona circumstances. It's really a great pleasure being today here in Rome and having a discussion on the future of Europe, because we all have felt in the last 2 years what it means if we as European citizens cannot live our European way of life, meaning living together in our common house of freedom, of liberty, of civil rights, but also of exchange. I mean, there are so many people here in Rome, there are so many people in Berlin, there are so many people in Budapest and all over Europe who love and live and work all together as Europeans, and the last 2 years have shown us what we lose if borders are being closed again and if we are not having the same situation as we have had before. And I think it's a good moment today and the starting of this new year that we gather here today, 65 years after we had the treaties of Rome all together as a foundation for our European house. And on the same situation, facing the challenges of a pandemic crisis, but also of a global climate crisis. This means we have to work even closer together, even though it's harder these days. And that's why, for us, it's so important that we embrace the changes openly and with courage, and that we shape our future all together. And I believe that we can do this only with a strategic vision, a vision of what we are going to do ahead and what is the future house we want to build and give to our children. And I believe that this is only possible if we work together as Europeans and have discussions like these, not when 2 ministers are meeting, but hopefully when Corona is in a better situation, on a daily basis, discussing about the future of our common European home. And I'm really happy that we had the conference on the future of Europe last year, and that we had, like, in different places, even digital ones now, citizens panels all over Europe. I guess we had a couple here in Italy. We did have a couple in Berlin, and we are discussing the results in Germany next week. And you have also started together with Germany, the German-Italian Spinelli Forum, bringing together young leaders between our 2 countries, because we know that Europe is not only a topic for academics, for politicians, for older ones, but it's really the home and the heart of younger people in Europe. And that's why, for me, it's so important of having this debate today here with you all together, of discussing about future key priorities for us as Europeans. I think one of the most important one is, and that's what you mentioned already, Luigi, is the question of sustainability within the European Union. We know that climate change is not only a reality, but it's also a question of freedom for us and for future generations. Europe must lead by example here with ambitious climate goals, and the Green Deal for Europe is one of the core pillars. But we also need strong EU climate diplomacy, because we all know that 92% of global greenhouse gases are emitted outside the EU. And energy is one of the examples for us how we can green Europe, but also how we can green the world. And not only in an environmental field, but also as a question for transformation and for wealth for the future. We see today that the question of sustainability, of climate issues and social justice is so closely intertwined when we look at our energy prices in Rome or in Berlin. It's all the same. It's not a question between economy, environment and social justice. It's all the same debate. And that's why for us as a new German government, but also in line with the Green Deal for Europe, we are working intensively to ramp up renewable energy to 80% by 2030. And we want to use this together with the digitalization as a new shift and as a new movement for working together on industrial projects all over Europe. This is my second point, because I believe that if we are looking and intertwining the question of climate policy and industrial policy and economic growth together, we are also strengthening European strategic sovereignty. We have seen that in the past already. Where I'm coming from, there has been like the solar valley in the eastern part of Germany. It was really important to show again that we are also investing in those regions which are not the high potential regions of industry in the past. But then we saw the shift from solar energy towards China. And we also saw the shift again of moving employment in this field. So if we are working now on green technology, it's so important that it's sustainable, not only environmental-wise, but also sustainable for those who find new jobs in these fields. And we have seen as well, especially with regard to the COVID pandemic, that it's in the vital interest to improve EU's abilities to act and to become less dependent in critical areas. We've seen this with regard of the supply, that even in the first time of the corona pandemic, that we couldn't produce enough of these masks, which we are having all together right now every day, and that we were highly depending on other regions, especially China, of producing the most simple health products because we have brought some of our health industry to other regions. Therefore, we discussed today also the question how we can use the experiences of this pandemic, the experiences of working together, also helping us in really critical situations, bringing patients from Italy to Germany, and then a couple of months ago bringing also Germans to Italy, how we can learn from these lessons also in the future of working together better in critical infrastructure, in health projects, and in a Europe which is more sovereign. In this regard, it is also vital that we are looking at a change of understanding of politics. That it's not only a question of governments meeting all together, but it's a question of bringing citizens, but also companies, universities, and all these who are working on the future together in different fields. And that's why we agreed today that we are setting up an action program between Italy and Germany, which is looking at the different areas, most importantly the question of climate policy, of energy policy, the whole question of security policy, foreign policy, but also how we can bring people more intensively together in the future with different projects, how we can combine our regions, how we can learn from each other. That's why I just visited a vaccination center here in Rome to learn how you are doing your preparation in your neighborhoods and in your regions. If we are bringing all these pillars together, sustainability, strategic sovereignty, but also listening to our citizens, then I truly believe the question of fighting for true European democracy based on values is not a decision anymore between values and interests on the other side, but it's actually two sides of the same coins. Because if we are thinking of being more sovereign with regard to energy, but also with regard to critical infrastructure, then we have to see that this can only work if we have fair competition rules and standards for our citizens, but also for our companies. So if we are talking about China, and if we are talking about the fight for fundamental human rights, it's also a question of fair competitions for those who are actually producing products. Because if a company is competing with another company from outside Europe, which doesn't apply to the ILO criteria, then it's not only a question of human rights, it's also a question of fair competition. And having this understanding all together, especially in time which is really critical, is, in my point of view, really not only a challenge, but it's a good starting point for a new friendship between Italy and Germany. And I'm very happy that we are starting this year, where we would like to formulate an action program between the two countries with a forum and a discussion with young people, because this is our future. So thanks a lot that we are here all together, also with the circumstances of talking with masks in our face. But I think this is the right moment to really bring together those who are thinking of our future. Thanks a lot.
Well, thank you so much for that, Minister. Thank you, Annalena. So let me perhaps start off with a couple of questions. We're really very much inspired by what you were saying. I mean, firstly, by sticking to this theme of a green Europe, and I think you're absolutely right in highlighting that in many respects, this is really a key also to engaging not only citizens, but the younger generations, for whom it is absolutely crystal clear, and you know this more than anyone else, that this is their number one priority. So it is, in many respects, a way for Europe to re-engage the public through the green agenda. Now, having said this, it is also clear that as any revolution, and this really is a revolution that we're engaging in, because decarbonization really entails a revolution of sorts, as all revolutions, there are winners and there are losers. And losers, as we move from words to action, will make their voices heard. And whether those losers are industries that fear they are being hollowed out, whether it's lower income households that have to face rising energy bills, whether we're looking at it either internally or even externally. I mean, countries that had been producing countries but are at the same time fragile countries that have to undergo this revolution. So I guess my first question to you really is, given that this transition is a political transition, how do we account for those social, economic, political and geopolitical consequences that it may have?
Thank you very much. Well, it has many dimensions, but I would like to point on two. The first one is, I believe, quite simple, and then, especially for politicians, quite hard. We have to be honest. I mean, if we are telling stories of saying, well, we want to green Europe, and we want to have a revolution of our industry, and we want to redefine our history of economic growth from the last 100 years, and you can just do it by a finger snap. I mean, first of all, who believes it? And secondly, it doesn't work. So every revolution, especially if it's a peaceful one, what we are trying to do, is extremely hard. And you always face boundaries, and you always face backlashes. So in order to be successful, you have to talk also about the hurdles. And that is why we tried, for example, now as a new government, saying, well, not that in 4 years everything is fine. In 4 years we will be at the 1.5 degree target line again, but probably for the next 2 years we will unfortunately fail our own climate and energy goals. So this is really hard to say, especially as a green politician, but what we are going to plan, and not only in Germany, all over Europe, is to phase out, first of all, coal, and then gas as well over time within 30 years. And this means so many new windmills, so many new solar production. And if we want to do this all together, we have to have a plan, and we have to have forces which are working together. And this brings me to my second part. You have to invest in this. And investing meaning at the core point that at the beginning you have to do even more investments. So what we are trying to do now in Germany, and this is also the discussion which we are having all over Europe, is saying we not only have to invest into new technology, but in social justice. We are thinking of an energy income, we are calling it right now. So paying people money, because we know that the prices for CO2 will go up. And now we have the situation, Luigi was mentioning this, that unfortunately energy is also being used as a pressure tool from other countries, and the prices are anyhow really high. So we cannot ignore the social dimension and have to support those who are not able to participate otherwise. Because people who have a lot of money, they can always buy themselves off. So it doesn't matter how high the price is. So for me, it's really the question of going green. It's a three-track approach. So you need pricing, because you have to tell that actually the greener product is in the end the better product. But you have to have also regulation saying this is allowed and this is not allowed. That's why it's so important to have also legislation on EU level, and it will be probably quite a big fight again about the Renewable Energy Act, about the new emission act for cars. And then a third part, you have to have investment, and these have to be state investments. And that's why also the question, even though it's really controversial, but the question about taxonomy is now so important, because we have to invest also with public money into infrastructure which is going green. And if we do it really good, in the end, if we do now the investment by public, it will be refunded afterwards from business, because we shouldn't do the same mistakes as we have done in the past, that everything which goes in the cleaner direction is paid by public, and then if the costs are going really high, that's what we are experiencing right now in Germany, and that's why we don't really like nuclear energy so much, is that when we are phasing out nuclear energy, the cost for the waste is not being paid by the companies anymore, but it's also being paid by the state. So we have to think a lot now, if we are investing into new technology, also green technology, if it's really competitive, that then also industry is paying back kind of the loans which the public has paid in the beginning.
Indeed, the taxonomy question is highly divisive in this country as well. And I'm sure there are going to be questions about this, so I'm going to park that for a moment. I wanted to pick up, though, looking at the global dimension of this. I mean, you mentioned China quite a lot, and you mentioned, I would say more broadly, I mean, you put it in terms of the sort of the values interest, dichotomy or not dichotomy. But looking at it within the values box, if you like, isn't there also a question of two sets of values that start to compete? So you have the human rights question, in particular, as it relates to labor standards, which you were mentioning, but then you also have your equally values-related targets on renewables. Are you going to be able to do both at the same time? So this is not, in a sense, a question of not you, Germany, us, Europe, yeah? You know, this is really a question of two sets of values that risk competing with one another, and what to give priority to, because it's very difficult to imagine that we can achieve our renewables targets, given the situation as is now, in the next 10 years without importing the goods from China.
And this is just living in a real world, I would say, where you cannot pick and choose between like the best and the best. But also, luckily, it's not only black and white. And I think the approach which Europe, and I would like to underline this here quite strongly, that from the European Commission, actually, already a couple of years ago, there was the understanding of a China strategy saying, well, we are, first of all, partners, because all climate and also other global crises, like we see now with the pandemic, in a globalized world, we can only solve together. So in these kind of fields, like your question, climate, obviously we have to work together, because as the virus doesn't stop at the border, also CO2 doesn't stop at the border. But secondly, we also have to recognize that we are competitors. If we are building new infrastructure, especially with regard to hydrogen, it's really the question who will be at the front runner seat. Is it Europe, or is it also here the US, or is it China? And if we want to be at the front, that's why it's so important that we move really quickly now with our Green Deal. We have to be really, really fast. And third, and this is the momentum of human rights, obviously, China is not a democracy, and it's also a question of system rivals. And therefore, for me, it's so important that we interlink the three parts. And we are not saying, okay, now we are talking about partnership, meaning green products, and later we are saying, but now we are talking about system reality, rivals. And we are ignoring things. And this is kind of what we are working on right now. We as the G7 presidency from Germany, also from Italy with the OECD presidency, but also as the European Union, saying if we are talking about infrastructure, let's focus on green infrastructure, but let's also focus on where we are actually investing our money. And this whole Global Gateway initiative, saying we have to prioritize, brings together your question of saying we have to invest into green technology, but we can also work most intensively with those partners, also in the Indo-Pacific regions, which are actually supporting our values and standards.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. I mean, in a sense, the way to square the circle is to try and develop those green capacities yourselves, but together with partners with whom eventually those values are going to be shared. I mean, my take is exactly the same on the Global Gateway. Now, let me sort of make the transition to a different subject, sort of, if you like, moving on to more traditional security issues. So as we speak here, there are other discussions going on in Geneva. And Europeans are not involved in those discussions, and yet we're talking about European security. And so, you know, obviously here the question really is Ukraine. Germany, together with France, has played a very important role through the Normandy format. I think it is very good news for everyone that the United States is now, if you like, taking a more active role, a more involved role. But I guess my question really is, how do we square that circle? And isn't this an issue where Europeans ought to be taking, again, a sort of more pronounced leadership, mediation role in leadership, together with the United States, and perhaps even, you know, thinking about enlarging the format? I mean, I think it was very interesting that in his consultations, President Biden also engaged Italy as well as the United Kingdom. So, you know, how to rethink, in a sense, mediation when it comes to Ukraine, when it comes to European security issues, in a way which actually gives Europeans a place at the table.
I think we do have a place at the table, and we shouldn't make us smaller than we are. Also, not at the current momentum. Well, obviously, the US plays a role here, and if we want to solve this crisis, and it's a deep crisis, and we have seen what happens if for 2 years or even more there aren't any talks, we have a really huge problems. But we as Europeans, and I think this is our strength, are not only 27 states, 1 + 1 + 1 + 1, and then you have the EU, we have our EU institutions, we have bilateral tracks, we have formats where a close group comes together, and if we look at the EU integration process, the most important projects have always been with a group of those states who go together like on the front line, like Schengen, like the Euro. It has never been all together, the whole EU. And in this point where we are at a really critical momentum for the security of Europe, and not just as a European Union, but as Europe, I think it's so important that we use a different track. And one is, as you mentioned today, it's a bilateral talks between the US and Russia. But we have also on Tuesday, so tomorrow, the NATO meeting for the preparation also for the NATO-Russian Council. Then we have at the end of the week, we have the foreign ministers meeting of the EU. And then we have the OECD. And interestingly, Poland is having now the chairmanship of the OECD, so also an important Eastern European country. And we have the Normandy format. And I stressed from the first day of my term of office that it's so important to restart the Normandy format again. And in between, we had already, between Christmas and New Year's, talks from different states, including Italy, including UK with the G7 format, where we also bring our lines together. And using all these different tracks is at the current moment, I truly believe, so important, and we cannot just say, okay, we only take one and hope this is successful at the end, because times are really, really challenging, and we are talking about European security only with Europeans at the table, but the good thing is that we are such a pluralistic group of Europeans that we can play in different formats.
And of course, the other big advantage of Normandy was that Ukraine was at the table, which it isn't in Geneva today. So that's another real sort of value added. Now, looking at in a sense, the empty side of that glass, what if everything fails? And if everything fails, we know that there is little interest in going to war, and when the military option is not an option, the economic sanctions option is an option. And obviously in this conversation, the whole question of Nord Stream 2 inevitably comes up. I mean, what are your views on that?
I don't tell a secret that obviously Nord Stream 2 has a geostrategic dimension, and not only by now, but for a long time. And we have to see also that, I mean, there's no gas, obviously, in Nord Stream 2. We have Nord Stream 1 as well, and we have also different gas pipelines towards Europe. And we have seen that, obviously, gas can be used as a strategic instrument. And if the other country, which is namely Russia, would like to send more gas to Europe or to Germany or to Europe via Germany, we could use Nord Stream 1 because it has a lot of capacities still right now. So the whole question we are talking about, yes, it's Nord Stream 2, and I come back to your point, but actually the true question is our dependency on energy because we are not able to provide enough energy by ourselves or have enough different sources of energy. That's why we are so highly depending from Russia. So I'm stressing this line because, I mean, if also like Nord Stream 2 would, I use the word would here because we have also media coverage here, but if it would be stopped, we are still depending on exports of energy. And that's why the whole Green Deal comes into place. The Green Deal is not only about environmental issues or something for a Green Party, it's a deeply security question. And actually, when the whole discussion about green energy and the Green Deal started, it was also an answer to the Ukraine conflict, because in 2014 we all said, okay, we have to be more independent, we have to redefine our gas directive, and now I'm coming to your point. The redefinition of the gas directive also meant unbundling of gas pipelines, and that's why at the current moment the process for Nord Stream 2 is being interrupted, because it's the same company which owns the gas pipeline and which wants to bring gas through the pipeline, and that's why at the current moment the whole process is being stopped. And I underlined as well when I was in Washington last week that what we agreed there, if energy is being used as a weapon, this has also consequences for all the energy infrastructure projects, which obviously Nord Stream 2 belongs to.
Now, before I open to the floor, perhaps just one last question on a topic that we haven't touched on, which is migration. And this is really an issue where, in many respects, I would say that Italy and Germany do have very complementary interests and are on the same page. And yet it's also a question where, unlike everything else that we've talked about, where a lot has been going on, at European level, migration is really an area where in this revival of the Union, we have not really managed to get it right. We have not really managed to unblock the stalemate. And so I guess my question is, especially as you speak here in Rome today, what kind of initiatives could be launched at member state level together, Italy, Germany, other member states, in order to unblock the migration stalemate as far as, obviously, the internal aspects are concerned? It's all very well and good and relatively, quote-unquote, easy to engage in migration partnerships externally. The snag comes when we talk about it internally, whether it's migration or in terms of asylum.
This is, I think the answer is of what I said in the beginning. We have to make ourselves very honest. And like saying we need a European asylum system by all 27 states sounds very nice, but obviously it hasn't happened in the last years, and I think, yeah, we all know it won't happen in the next years. So we have to think about other formats, and we have, that's what I said already with Schengen and Euro. It's not an anti-European understanding if you say we have to work with those together who are willing to work on policy fields together. It has been always a motor for integration steps within the European Union, and we have the instrument there for the enhanced cooperation, even in the treaties. And we discussed this also in the morning together. We have the La Valletta process already, where states have already agreed in the past about figures saying when countries at the borders have new people being rescued in the seas, which countries are taking those also. And I think we have to work on La Valletta process. Also, this is then the understanding also from Germany, also with the question of second migration. I know because also in the past, as an opposition leader, we have always asked for the numbers. So how many people did Germany take from Greece, from Italy? And on the other hand, we always get the answer. But so many people were actually entered in those countries and weren't taken back. So it's all interconnected. But here also we have to talk in friendship about a mechanism which works in solidarity for everybody, but doing nothing is no solution, neither for the countries at the border like Italy, definitely not for those people dying in the Mediterranean seas, and we cannot say we are a union of values, but then it's too hard for us to find a solution. And again, here the solution won't be there tomorrow by 100%. But doing at least something means saving lives. And doing at least something means also that other countries cannot blackmail us any longer, because they know that if there's a problem at the border, like everybody in Europe gets totally nervous. And this is a weak point when other countries who want to split our European friendship will jump in. So I think it's really a question of humanity, but it's also a question of security and strengthening legal process. And yeah, we agreed today that this will be one of the projects also in our action plan. Well, obviously, Italy and Germany will not save all the problems, only bilaterally. But we are two big countries in the European Union, and if we move forward on this field of migration, I think others will not only follow. We have already had the situation that 10 or 12 states work together, and this is what I definitely would like to build on.
I think you're right. It creates a critical mass, which makes it very difficult then for others to ignore. And I think you're absolutely right in highlighting the fact that, you know, in what is known as hybrid warfare, I mean, hybrid warfare works because you pick on what you consider to be your adversary's fragilities and weaknesses. And the truth is, why does this constitute such a weakness for us? And it has to do with our internal unity, and that really is what one has to work on. So let me now turn to the floor and have, I'm sure I have several questions. Hands up, hands up. Yeah. No, aspetta, il microfono che arriva.
Well, thank you very much. I have an internal politics question, which has a lot of consequences on in my opinion, on foreign policy. We've seen in different contexts how internal divisions within democracies have weakened the ability of democracies to stand on the international stage and to defend human rights, freedom, democracy worldwide. Your government is a welcome breakthrough in Germany, but it means there are winners and losers. It means you could have sown some division in society. You could have, maybe not, maybe yes. It depends a lot how you, as a coalition, will behave and what kind of internal climate you will build. And this is a question that concerns Germany, but it also concerns Italy a lot. So what are your thoughts on how to strengthen democracy in Germany, how to make a better dialogue between majority and opposition, how to increase the quality of the political dialogue in order for Germany to be stronger in the international stage to defend our values and our view of the world.
There were three parts of the question. I would start with saying the good thing is in a democracy that everybody can have its own opinion, and there's majority thinking and minority, and it changes all the time. But probably we won't have any topic where 100% in a society agrees. So I think we have to be a bit careful, because also in the last years there have been some topics which were so emotional, because they also went directly to the identity of society, and now with Corona, I don't know how you feel it, but to the identity of some families, because you cannot believe that your own uncle thinks that vaccination is something out of this world. So if we have this fundamental identical debate, but I think we have to be careful in this debate, because we have also what you were also describing, this, we have to be careful that there's no split in society, like with every topic. When we phased out for nuclear the first time, well, we did it a couple of times in Germany, we gave in and out, but for the first time it was also the red-green coalition almost 20 years ago. And it was not that 100% of the Germans wanted to phase out of nuclear. And especially when you were talking with industry, most of the industry was totally against it. But anyhow, this is democracy. It was a decision by a government which has been elected. And this understanding, I think we have to have also in other projects we are doing right now. Yes, if we are deciding on whatever, the Green Deal, the taxonomy, also the question if products from enforced labor will come to the European market, there will be always people who think this is not the right decision, but this is democracy. But the question you're saying on the other hand is, if we are taking, and this is a strong democracy in my point of view, if we are taking the arguments from the others very seriously, or if we are saying, well, now we are having the majority, so it's your pity that the next election is only in 4 years' time, and then you can change something. But instead, bringing together also those who think we have another way where we can go is a really strong democracy, because you're ready for criticism, you're ready for a different point of view, and if it's really a constructive debate, most of the time there is something where you think, oh, I haven't thought about this argument yet, maybe it's not my way, but it leads to the same goal, and in the end it's not only 55% which will follow, but it's 75% which will follow. And I think this is my second part of the answer, really trying to engage those who do not support your cause but are open for a critical and open debate is really crucial in those times. And then the third part, because you also asked about the external dimension, is that democracies have to work together. And this is what we were discussing in Liverpool at the G7 meeting. It's easy to say, well, all the G7 states do not like what Russia is doing at the moment. Well, obviously, we do not like this, and we are formulating our understanding and standpoint of what will follow if military action or whatever is going to work. But showing also that working together with democracy makes a difference. For example, in the field of a pandemic, saying, because leading democracies do not only vaccinate their own people, but are sharing vaccination tools, are sharing experience, and also going to other countries in the world and not leaving it to China and others of doing the vaccination support there, is something where democracies can show that working together makes a difference, and that international institutions are making a difference. And this is something I believe we can be better in the future of working together. I mean, most of the time it's hard, but it brings a better outcome in the end, and especially with the pandemic, especially with worldwide vaccination, of course, there's room for maneuver, and this is, for example, one of the topics we are looking intensively at the G7 presidency, how we can increase our engagement in this regard.
Thank you. There was a question, yeah. Over here, here. Eccoti, sì.
Thank you so much. I thank the two ministers.
And please introduce, I forgot to say earlier, that was Lia Quartapelle. Please introduce yourself.
I'm Sara Secchi. I'm a student at Louis University for a Master of Arts in International Public Affairs. So I'm really interested in the youth aspect of the green energy. And I'm wondering, the gap generation, it's huge sometimes when climate actions are taken into consideration. The decision might not fit the young people needs sometimes. So I'm wondering which kind of tools member states are developing for including young people in the decision-making process on that topic. Thank you.
Very good question. I think one big part is opening the conferences, like the climate conferences, to more organizations. And for example, the climate conferences have a speciality there because NGOs and all these kind of organization groups can register. I know many different organizations from Germany which always bring youth organization to the climate conferences, and it's not normal. We have other UN processes and conferences where not so many organizations and not so many especially youth organization can participate. But this is only one minor track because it's the international conferences. But the whole question of now building the Green Deal and actually are debating what kind of project we have to do, this has to be very inclusive. And this meaning if we are rewriting our energy laws, having a broad, inclusive process of bringing together people, bringing together different actors. And for example, in one of the region of Germany, Schleswig-Holstein, it's called, where we have most of the windmills in Germany, when there were the discussion about the electricity grids, where we have a lot of opponents in Germany, like many people say we need green energy, but okay, the windmills many don't like, but what they really don't like is the grids over their houses. But I mean, obviously you need them. So there was a process being started in this region of saying, okay, we asked those people who are living there actually not if they want to have the grid, because obviously we need it, but where do we want to have it? Like this side around the village or this side around the village, or maybe underground, but then it's more expensive, and are you ready to pay for this? And this form of integration people, not at the end of a project, and then you can say, well, you can go to court against this new line, but integrating then at the beginning of the process is something which is also the question for democracies, which is a strength of a strong democracy. But in the past, we have engaged many people which are organized, like the mayor and the citizens of the town, and not so much youth groups. And that's why we are thinking now, for example, with an expert body also for the government on climate issues, and they are bringing also the youth voice on these kind of boards in this participation processes. But actually also my question would go back because it's not always politicians to tell what we should do, but maybe also my question would be to you, where you see room for being more engaged in the Green Deal process.
Sarah, do you have any thoughts on that? Yeah, please.
Yes, I think that inclusion of youth NGO is very important because they have, for example, different way of communication. I have been engaged in this European level with a big NGO, so I think that it's kind of tool we can use, but then like the basis of education. Until we won't see something since primary school changing, like about awareness and on education of our children, and how the school also is investing its own resources, I don't think we will really trust, if I can say so.
This is a good point, actually, why you're mentioning it. In the election campaign, there were many young people also coming to our campaign rallies, which I find really astonishing, because there's always this saying the youth is not interested in politics, which obviously latest since Greta, but also in many, many other topics, young people want to engage. And actually what you're proposing right now, many younger people told me very often, it has to be like one part in school education, also the question of sustainability as environmental issues. And on the other hand, the youth is quite more advanced than many adults. And there are many projects I know in German schools where they say, okay, if you do energy saving projects like putting solar on your roof or saving energy by turning off the bulbs, you can keep the money the school is actually saving for the school, and you can reinvest it into the schools. And yeah, this is actually the point you were making. If you're giving also young people the power and the decision making to themselves, we can really go one step further. So this should be also something for our action plan, the engagement of schools and universities.
Education, absolutely. There was a question, yeah, exactly. Then I promise I'm going to get to a man, I promise.
Thank you. So hi, my name is Federica Faganello. I'm a student in the German School of Rome, so I have my Abitur coming up, my final exams this year. And you know, myself being of mixed nationality, German and Italian, I really feel really European and also strongly a part of the European Union. And you already touched on, you know, conflicting values with China, for example. And I wanted to ask also internally in the European Union, we cannot deny that we have countries like Poland or in some sectors also Hungary that really there are some conflicts in some areas. And I wanted to ask how we can best work with but also deal with these conflicting ideals internally in the European Union itself, and also for a young person that maybe has to kind of get along in the European Union, how we should work with that.
Yeah, hard question, and as everybody can see, it's not so easy, because one way is, which the Commission is taking right now, and I think it's a correct way, saying that applying European rules and also European law is not only a process when you enter the European Union and have to fulfill all the Copenhagen criteria, but it's also a process afterwards. And that's why I believe that the whole work on the rule of law mechanism, which has been done in the last years, quite recently only, was really, really important also with regard to your question, strengthening the trust in European democracy, and also meaning then we have to apply to these kind of things, and also connecting it to the question of European funding and European money. But for me it's very important, if we are talking then about countries, because it's government's decision, that we differ between government, citizens, but also regions and cities, because we see, like in so many countries, I mean also Germany, and this is also very important, there have been also court cases against Germany because we are not applying every European directive. So it's not only some states in the European Union, probably there are also a couple of cases with regard to Italy where we do not comply with European law. But it's very important that also with regard to Poland, for example, there have been so many refugees coming from Ukraine going to Poland, but nobody talked about them because we were talking about refugees coming from the south, but they integrated many, many refugees also from Ukraine in this regard. And there are cities, there are mayors which are saying, actually, yes, we would like to help. And thinking about how we can also fund those projects, those cities, if government doesn't apply with European law, is really, really important, because in the end, it's a European Union of 450 million citizens, and not only of 27 governments.
Now, look, before I turn to you next. Actually, I'm going to ask you a question from up there, Roberto Coscastaldi, who's asking us actually a question, asking you a question about, I guess, European foreign policy and European defense policy. I mean, he frames it in the context of the Russia-Ukraine sort of crisis, but I think more broadly, I guess, what he's asking is what are the prospects for Europeans to step up as far as defense integration is concerned?
At the moment, it's in German Realpolitik. The prospect of security and defense policy is what we're discussing in the beginning, having a strong European but also united voice on the question of European security and Russia. And that's why it's so important if we are talking about sanctions. We are talking about an understanding that anyhow EU sanctions have to be put in place by 27 states in this field. And on the other hand, it shows already the difference then when we are talking about climate targets in this field, we obviously, and everybody knows here in the room, we do not have the principle that everybody has to agree because we have majority voting. And we know that in these policy fields we moved further with integration project because we didn't have to wait for the last country also agreeing. And this is obviously one of the challenges we are still having in foreign policy, also in financial questions in the European Union with regard to taxation, that it takes longer. And that's why we meet so often, because it needs a lot of talking in the field of foreign common security and foreign policy. But yes, I would say one of our visions, but I use the word visions, is here also that we have to come to majority voting in this field, knowing that treaty changes are really, really hard, and especially in those days are really hard. But, for example, we talked about China beforehand. We have now the new idea, I think a very good way to follow, with anti-coercion instrument. It could be also a foreign policy instrument, but because in this field we have unanimity, it's being dealt with right now in the trade committee and also for the trade ministers, because there you can have majority voting in the end, and there you can see what the difference is if you have to wait for all 27 or if you can do it with a group which wants to go forward.
And I'm glad you actually mentioned QMV, because it was a question from Vladimir Handel from Charles University in Prague, so that allows me to kill two birds with a stone. But I had a question over there.
Thank you. I'm Lorenzo Pastorelli. I'm a high school student in Milan. As many of my age, I'm concerned with climate change, of course. And my question is about the net zero goal and the carbon neutrality goal to reach by 2050. Now, if Europe is serious about this goal, intermittent renewables alone seems insufficient and are being shown to be insufficient for our incapacity to store large amount of energy for a long time, because they depend on the presence of sun, of wind and of water. We cannot be always guaranteed. And on the other hand, gas is not an entirely green source of energy, and as we mentioned, there is a political threat that comes with being overly reliant on Russian gas, which exposes Europe to economic and political threat. So, as we know, Germany strongly opposed to nuclear power and nuclear energy for a variety of reasons. And my question is, should this decision be proven to slow down and damage significantly the path toward carbon neutrality and toward net zero goal? Would there ever be room, in your opinion, in the German public and political debate to reconsider nuclear energy as a last resort opportunity to solve this gigantic energy and climate issue?
As you were asking for Germany, I have a short answer, and it's no. Because we are phasing out nuclear this year, so the last nuclear power plants will go offline. There have been already a couple beginning of this year, which went offline, and there is de facto no company anymore which has then nuclear power plants. And the whole question about nuclear power is not only, in my point of view, the question of security, waste, and everything we saw already in the past with accidents, but it's also incredibly expensive. And all nuclear power production only works if it's highly, 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 highly subsidized. And this is the point. If we are using now money, public money, and we have to invest, the question is, do we invest in a technology which can only fly if it's highly subsidized? And I mentioned the topic of waste in the beginning. Or do we use this money, and again, being very frank, also if we use hydrogen at the moment, it only works if we subsidize it. So also this is subsidized, but at some point it will work by itself. And that's why Germany, and not only the current new government, but also the government before, has decided if we have to use public money, we want to use it now for green technology, for gas as a transition. We need still also fossil gas for the moment. We need it also when we want to invent the technology which we use later for hydrogen, but now we have to use the technology as with electric cars. There's also not 100% renewable electricity. Anyhow, we already produce electric cars, and part of it is also electricity from coal power plants. But we said now for the starting point, we have to move forward with the technology. And it's the same now with hydrogen. It's not 100% green yet, but we have to go this path that it will be green latest. And we in Germany said that it's even before 2020. Every infrastructure which is being built right now has to be hydrogen ready, and it loses its permit at some certain moment of time when it's not green hydrogen in the infrastructure. So this is the path we are going right now. And the question you're asking about storage, yes, currently it's a problem, but it has also been a problem in Germany. I don't know your energy market in Italy so much, but I guess it's all over Europe the same, that for the taxation of storage, like in Germany, it was like when the electricity came into a storage, you had to pay all the taxes and all the extra things you have to pay. Once when the electricity comes in, and when it goes out, you have to pay it again. So obviously, this doesn't pay off. So who invests into this kind of storage system? Nobody. So we are going to change the regulation in this field to make storage more competitive. And this is now, we can see already that even like bigger forms of storage are being built. But we need the interconnection of Europe. And this is also a big, big European part. If we have the solar in the south in Europe, but even outside Europe, if we are looking to Maghreb states, but if we do not have the interconnection grids between Spain and France and then going further to Germany, we do have a problem. So the whole question of energy independence is also a question of a true energy union where every part of Europe is really interconnected to solve the problem that at some moment in time we will have definitely less sun than here in Rome and maybe also less wind, but we still have enough energy because the whole mix also with water and hydrogen is solving our problem. And we need, obviously, we need also hydrogens from other parts of the world.
I have a question here. I've got so many, but I'm just going to pick and choose. From Simon Sundaraj-Cohen that asks a question about how to address fake news and social media abuses. And the question is framed actually rather interestingly because it's framed in relation to the intergenerational information gap. So how to go about that?
I have to think about the question of intergenerational information gap first, but maybe somebody's more in the room if it's like between the youth and the older generation or in between, because I think it has two sides of dimension. Well, obviously that the youth, like even my two daughters, they know more news on YouTube and wheresoever than I do, but in the end also I'm confronted quite often with fake news and have to explain my little daughters what fake news is actually all about. And yes, we have seen it. We have seen it also in the German election campaign, also me personally. And after the elections in the US last years, there has been a momentum where there was like the starting of a debate between the European Union and the new administration in the US about fake news, also about regulation with regard to big platforms. And actually, when I was now in Washington again the day before the 6th of January, I discussed with Nancy Pelosi again that we have to take really this momentum, which kind of stopped a bit because of the pandemic, debating between the European Union and the US about regulation of hate news, about fakes, but also regulation of big platforms with regard to information. Because, yeah, what we are saying, if something is a crime on the streets, if you can do it directly, it should be also a crime in the digitalized world, and it should be also possible to prosecute these kind of crimes. I mean, it's not only fake news, it's hate. We see it also for younger generation. I don't know how it's here, but if I go to schools those days, like in every class, if questions are being raised, it's a question about mobbing. It's a question about how can we protect ourselves, what's going on in WhatsApp chat groups and these kind of things. So it's really, really a question also of protecting not only against crimes where you can say it's really hatred which can be prosecuted because it's a criminal charge, but kids are starting their school lives with these kind of forms of hate. And this is really one of the tasks we have to work on quite intensively.
Question over there. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm Marzia Granadi. I'm a student at LUMSA University in Roma, and I'm about to start my internship here in the Institute at the Department of Communication. Let me just say that I'm so grateful for this opportunity, so thank you. What have been and what are the effects of the COVID-19 pandemic on the European Green Deal goals, if any, of course, and if there have been any slowdowns or issues, what is the European position? I mean, whether there is any cooperative strategy already in place in this sense. Thank you.
The impact that the pandemic has had on the Green Deal. Yeah, whether it's slowed down, sped up.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, good question. I don't know if I'm ready to answer it because I guess the consequences we don't know yet. For me, the most important one was a saying, I don't know if you have it here also in Italy, it's like there's no glory in prevention. When kind of everybody realized, oh my God, yes, we knew that there's a pandemic coming and we had all the news from China. And then there was a debate being started of saying, well, maybe we shouldn't shake our hands anymore. And everybody was thinking, well, it cannot be so bad in the end. Even though we had already some warnings, then we had the pictures from you in Italy, how tremendous and like dramatic it was. And then there was this moment of realizing we should do something. Even then, we talked about what we were saying both at the beginning of our introduction, working together in this pandemic. We should work together as Europeans. But it's so hard at those moments and think ahead. But I think this is, for me personally, my biggest lesson. Yes, there's no glory in prevention, but anyhow, prevention is the best solution for every crisis. And it goes from every field. It goes to the climate question. Like, if we are spending now money and trillions we need to spend to go green after the fossil economy, but it's even cheaper as if we are doing nothing at the moment. And you had it here already in Italy with all the burnings, and you had here, we had it with the water coming down in summer, and we see what these kind of climate effects can destroy. And in the end, you cannot pay off the infrastructure, and many people will lose their lives. And it's the same if we look with regard to humanitarian aid. Internationally, it's again there, if you see a crisis upcoming, if you see that the World Food Programme doesn't have enough money, you can wait and the crisis explodes in a country, or can say, okay, we invest now and it's good investment that we prepare countries of not going into a crisis. And yes, I think this is my lesson, even though I'm not having the final answer yet. how you can find the correct moment before the crisis is there and saying, now we have to invest into prevention. I think with climate we actually on a good track because actually we know what we have to do. The thing is that we have to do it fast enough.
And as a very last question, because our time's running out, I could not actually, I'll pick one from online here, from Gabriele Carrer, given that, you know, we are here in an Italian-German context, and so it's a fit way to end this conversation to ask you where we stand on the Italy-German action plan as it relates or as it compares or doesn't with the Aachen Treaty, for instance.
Well, the Aachen Treaty has been signed already, so we stand obviously at a different stage. But anyhow, it's not about comparing treaties, like comparing what Italy has done with France, or France with Germany, or Spain with whoever, because it only makes sense if we look at the chances and maybe also the challenges between our two countries. And they are different between France and Germany, and obviously Germany and Italy. And it's good, because otherwise we wouldn't need bilateral treaties anyhow. And our understanding of the two of us is it's not against anybody. It's really looking at where can German, Italian-German cooperation make a difference and a benefit for Europe as such. Because there are fields, we have discussed a couple of them today, where we see, okay, Europe should act, but it's not acting fast enough, or it's not able to act because it needs all the 27 states. And we are at the stage currently of saying we identify those fields where we can make a difference for Europe and also a difference for our two countries, and where we have bilateral themes where we can work together. For example, the pandemic, also one of the answers to your question, showed us again how intensively we are as Germans with our car industry depending on Italy. The moment when you close down everything, the biggest topic for German industry was how can we help Italy with regard to the health system and with regard to support in this pandemic, because the factories have to reopen again, otherwise we cannot work in Germany. And again, like these kind of bad moments show us always how important our working together is, and this is especially one of the fields where we see that Italy and Germany are highly interconnected because we are both industrialized countries which depend on each other, but also have a big value for the European Union, semiconductors and all this technology. So it's about the Green Deal, it's about migration, it's about youth, it's about culture, but it's also about working together in future industrial fields. And then you can measure us, or your question, we also discussed about how we can engage civil society and especially youth in this process. So I really hope that this debate is also a starting point for our action plan, and maybe we can discuss it then when it turns out to be finalized again, either here in Rome or in Berlin or somewhere in between. So thanks a lot for the debate.
Well, thank you so much, Minister Baerbock. I mean, this has been really a wonderful sort of tour de force across Europe and the world. Thank you for sharing all of this with us. I mean, your dynamism, your energy really is, it's a wonderful start for us here in the Institute, and I'm sure for all of us. And thank you, Minister, for being with us today. A wonderful start to the year. Thank you so much.
Thank you. All the best.